text your girlfriend, I am your girlfriend, and let them know we are back on live. We talk about mental health right now.
The lady from yesterday was really informative.
Oh, we're about to talk about mental health right now for all the children that have mental health issues and need some help. They're about to give y'all some informative information here to definitely help y'all out. So definitely tune into this live. Definitely share this live. And invite all your friends. And let them know I'm here. We're here for the share.
All right, guys. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll let and really quickly want to go ahead and introduce and welcome our next session on mental health. Our first speaker is Ms. Quinn G, my mother, of Us Helping Us. She is a licensed professional counselor and a psychotherapist with Us Helping Us. And we also have Dr. Jonathan Good of Good Psychological Services. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Quinn G. Get excited.
Speak it to the mic, Caroline. Put your mouth to the mic, girl.
Alright, can y'all see me? Yes. Alright. Yes, I'm from Mississippi. Let's just get it out the way, right? Alright, my name is Quinn G. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a licensed psychotherapist here in D.C. I am the therapist for Us Helping Us, and I'm also the owner of Mental Health, which is my own private practice. I specialize in minority-related issues, women's issues, LGBTQI spectrum issues, codependency, PTSD, and sex-related trauma. Okay? And I've been doing it for about 5 years, and I've been with Us Helping Us since May. So now that I've given y'all everybody except my social, I want to open it up with a quick couple of questions. So from the comfort of your seat, just answer true or false, all right? You have to see a therapist only when you have mental illness.
False.
All right, good. Every therapist is equipped to handle all your issues.
False.
And only major issues affect mental health.
False.
All right, well, y'all know some stuff. Y'all married? Y'all married since like today? No, I'm kidding. All right, so what influences your mental health, right? So the way that I like to describe it, like anything that has major significance in your life can impact your mental health. That could be your relationship, that could be work, that could be your children, fur babies, sex, anything like that. Anything can impact your mental health, and it can happen at any time in your life, right? And not having mental illness is not necessarily indicative of mental health. So just because you don't have like a diagnosable disorder doesn't mean that you're mentally healthy, right? And I think it's really important to know that just like anything else, like health can be on the spectrum. And sometimes you're healthier than you think you are. Some situations and environments influence your mental health more than others. So let's think about where you spend the most time during the day. For most of us, it's work, right? That's where we spend most of our time. So I would like you to take a real quick 5-second inventory about how your work impacts your mental health. Right? So all of us like can give like a real shady, you know, like so because work is where we work and at home is where we spend most of our time. And those things severely impact our mental health. So now I want you to think about your work environment. Is it healthy? Is it a healthy place that lends itself to, you know, like wellness?
No, it's very stressful.
It's very stressful. For most of us, even if the workplace is healthy, it's still a stressful environment because you got to get up, go there, talk to people, interact with their mental health if they have any issues, talk to clients, customers, consumers, whoever, right? There are so many components that can affect you every single day in any capacity. And so it's just really important for you to be aware of like all of the different things that can affect your health, right? So the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their potential and can cope healthily. So let's think about coping skills. What are some of y'all coping skills?
Alcohol, weed.
All right.
Coke.
Meditation. Alcohol, weed. I heard those two.
Music.
Running, exercising,
Walking.
Food.
Sex.
Okay.
Sex.
All right. So I hear a lot of process addictions. So process addictions are things that you do, right? Everybody's alcohol and drugs. All drugs are not the worst drugs, by the way. Pro drugs, right? But healthy drugs. But also, though, process addictions can have just as much impact on your life as chemical addictions. So sex, gambling, work addiction is a big one. And people don't usually recognize those as harmful behaviors, especially because work addiction is one of the very few addictions that's reinforced by society. When you work in 60, 70 hours a week, what you get? Like a good job, like, oh, you clocked in, I see you, you know. But it's not healthy if you don't have a work-life balance. Okay? You don't. Most of us don't. And other process addictions like sex, gambling, those things, like I'm no longer in tune with the discipline that sex can be addictive, but it can be harmful if used incorrectly. There are two different disciplines around sexuality as like a practice. So there's the CSAT model and there's the ASEC model. The CSAT model does look at 10 types of sex disorders, and it does say that you can be addicted to sex. The ASEC model is a little bit more inclusive and says that you can. So if you're seeking out a therapist for any work around sex, or your sexual addiction, or if you have one, or any kind of sexual behaviors, make sure that the therapist is in alignment with your views about that part. But also religion can impact our mental health, right? So how many of us are religious? Okay. How many of us are more spiritual? Most everybody, right? And the shift from religion to spiritual is often because like religion rejects a lot of people on the LGBTQ spectrum, right? And I always try to help my clients like look at their divorcing from religion as kind of a grieving process. So like you would mourn the death of a loved one, you do need to kind of mourn your the difference in your relationship with your religion, right? Especially church, if you went to church. So all of these things can impact our mental health every single day. So with the unhealthy addictions and the unhealthy coping mechanism and the healthy ones, is there a point where you recognize that you're doing too much life? So how do you know you're drinking too much? How do you know you're eating too much? How do you know you're exercising too much?
You're told that it takes time.
Your body tells you.
Yeah.
Your body tells you, okay. What if you have a high level of tolerance?
I mean, even if you have a high level of tolerance, eventually it's going to come to a point where you're just like, hey, it's too much.
Okay. So what if you're also addictive? Like the point of addiction is that even when you recognize it's too much, you cannot stop it.
Oh yeah, that's when you're too far gone. That's when you have no control.
I would say I think that's when you have no control.
I need to know what is addiction.
So not being able to stop is the alarm sign, right? So at that point, what do you do?
When everything you do revolves around getting that high.
So the goal is to make sure that people always seek treatment for things that you can't handle, your immediate circle can't handle. Your friends are good friends, but they ain't your therapists, right? How many times have your friends told you harmful things? Especially about your relationship. Everybody can relate to that, right? Okay. So it's important to have a kind of like neutral person to come and look at your life and help you sort through some things. Now, I always tell my clients, I ain't God. I'm just a bitch that went to school. And because that's true. That's it. Because it's important to let you know, like, when you enter into this relationship with me therapeutically, I am not inherently right. I am not your parent. I am not a God. I'm not a friend. And this is a collaborative effort. So if you come into my office and you're willing to do the work, then together we can make you healthy. But it ain't just my job, and it damn sure ain't yours because you didn't know how to do it anyway, right? That's the point of being here. So I like to set up like that kind of model with my clients. But in order to do that, it's important for you to know like what kind of therapist you're looking for. So one of the questions I ask is, are all therapists equipped to handle your issues?
No.
Everybody else will know. Why do you think not?
Some people specialize in certain stuff that may not be comfortable.
Right, that's true.
I think some therapists become set in their, like, okay, they feel like because they have more knowledge than you, they become set in this way of, and I like that you said that you're not always right, because you have some therapists that would be like, well, I'm telling you this, and this is what it is. But that might not be what it is. That just because you've encountered that before with other people doesn't necessarily mean that's my issue. I could be bipolar and you telling me I'm schizophrenic.
Being very transparent, I've had several therapists, and well, spending currently. So, during that process, I've noticed how some people you mesh with, and then some people you don't. They're human, just like you, that may not be exactly what you need on some aspects, and then maybe you need to do a little more work on being able to listen and coping with it.
It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Two-way street.
Some therapists they're trauma therapists. I see a trauma therapist. And that is completely different than going to someone that you see maybe every week, because they might be processing what is your everyday living or every week living, whatever the case may be. And then you have some who specialize even within the trauma section that deal with, if you've been molested or, raped or things like that, that they can really help you cope through those mechanisms. Then you have the psychiatrist, who is the one who typically prescribes you the medication. And if you've ever seen a psychiatrist before, they just write a bunch of stuff down on a piece of paper, and they just are listening to what you're saying, and then there you go, there's your script right there. And that can not be beneficial for people also. And so you have to be one, when you go into therapy, be honest for what you're looking to get out of it, because if you're not honest, you'll be caught up in the system, and then you'll be right back at square one again.
True.
And be willing to be realistic to what you can put into it.
Okay. So usually I tell clients the first part of seeking a therapist is demographics matter. So think about who you would be comfortable sitting in front of telling some deep, dark stuff. For me, I could never see a white male therapist. It just doesn't make sense to me. A white woman, maybe on her best day, right? And I gotta look at her credentials. But usually I know for me, that's just being fair. And for me, I would need to sit in front of a black woman because that demographic is really important to me. And it's okay for you to have specifications about who treats you. Okay? I do understand that sometimes in certain markets and places that there's a limitation and restriction on availability of clinicians. And so there you do have to kind of make some kind of sacrifices. But at the same time, when there's a larger availability of resources, you do not have to take who sits in front of you. When you sit with a therapist, you are interviewing them as they are interviewing you, especially in the first session. And it's important for you to feel autonomy in that relationship and be able to be comfortable knowing that I picked you too.
What about the people that's not familiar with them, and like in our community, they just think that white people are therapists and them are the ones that we should go to see help? How do you tell them that that's not always the case?
Just like I just said, just knowing that, like, if it's important, like, what would make you feel comfortable to be able to talk to someone? Do they have to be a certain color, a certain age bracket, a certain gender? Like, you can research therapists. That's the point of us having profiles. Like, you can look at our profiles and see what we do, where we went to school, our backgrounds, and things like that. And so, if those things are important to you, be able to do your research. Again, I'm talking about when you have, like in DC, like there's a huge number of therapists, right? But back home in Mississippi, there were only a few. And so there was a limited market. So I do understand that component. Does that answer your question?
No, only because I'm thinking of from that aspect of like, like growing up, we always thought that it's the white doctor, the white dentist, the white therapist, like these are the people that you need to go to and seek help from, and black people really don't know what they're talking about.
So then you would have to confront your own internalized biases before you would even like seek treatment. And I'm not very sure how a white clinician could help you address those things. Right? That's something like somebody back there said, like being aware of like what you need, you know, like being aware of your own biases when you go in. I know I'm biased against white men. I don't want to sit in front of no white man and talk to him about no black woman issues. I definitely don't want to sit in front of no white woman and talk to her about black women's issues because I am aware of my own bias there. And let's just say that you have the cognitive ability to be aware of that bias, right? That's what we're talking about, right? That privilege. If you are aware of that, then I would just encourage you to interview a couple of therapists and see what fits.
I want to add on to that too, point, because you make a great point. The therapeutic alliance has a huge role and impact on the outcome of treatment, basically you getting better. So if you have a therapist-client matching, like a black male therapist and a black male client, that's great. The rapport, the therapeutic alliance is there. There are nuanced details that you don't have to go over because they get it, hopefully. They might. But at the same time, there are mutual blind spots, right? Like say for me, a gay male therapist, seeing a gay male client, there are things that we commonly experience together, which could bring up what they call counter-transference, transference in the work. So I'm saying, I like to say, like, it definitely is a great thing, but there are setbacks, or there are other ways of looking at this too. What we're trying to do, and the gentleman spoke earlier, is trying to reduce and break through the stigma of certain ways of getting access to care. So there will be ruptures sometimes when you work with non-black therapists. You work through those sometimes too. But it's very important to realize that just because you're working with a black therapist, that doesn't necessarily mean that the treatment of outcome is going to be successful. We're trying to reduce the stigma at the same time, but by all means, if you feel comfortable working with a minority therapist, then do that, because if that's what gets you in, and that's what gets your members in, your house members in, that's what you do. You help them make that connection. But let's look at this not in a black and white thinking per se. Let's kind of look at this more globally in terms of therapist-client matching based on race, ethnicity, and gender. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say demographics matter because you, again, like if to get you into like being comfortable just going to therapy, right? To just start. And then once you realize like, okay, so for instance, older black women, I don't mesh well with it. We're still black women, but there's a barrier there around age and also around me being a queer woman. And so that part is like difficult for me to get through. So I recognize again, that's my barrier there. So then even still, it doesn't mean that the person sitting in front of me is qualified. Every therapist is not qualified to treat all your issues, right? So for people who are new to therapy, demographics are important because it makes you more comfortable sitting in that room, right? And then once you recognize, like, okay, here's what my presenting issue is. Like, so let's say that you're struggling with substance abuse or sex trauma, then it would be good for you to look for therapists who are specialized in what you think your presenting issue is. Now, quite often, therapists and clients have different opinions about what the presenting issue is. Okay? Because sometimes clients come to my office like, yeah, it's just my relationship. And I'm like, actually, it's this right here. So I hear you know, but this affects this in a bigger way. And being able to understand that, okay, again, I have choices here. We're not talking about like court mandated or anything like that. We're talking about autonomous decision making in your mental health process. You have choices. You don't have to just seek the first person who's available to you. And it's okay for you to disagree with your therapist. And it's really important for you to be able to verbalize that. And if you don't have a relationship where you feel comfortable expressing discourse, then that's probably not a healthy therapeutic relationship anyway.
I'm speaking from my first experience with when I seek therapy. Now, I had like a situation where as I was raped and it was very violent. So I had told the lady about it because I started thinking that someone was following me. I was getting paranoid. And I had told her about it in the way that she had just dismissed it. Had like, I didn't like that. I was like, look, are you trying to tell me that something like what I'm feeling is not, it doesn't matter? And when she did that, I kind of had said to myself, I was like, whoa, you know what? I'm just going to need to go and find someone else better equipped for me. And it's sad to say that it happened to have been a white woman that I was able to go in that room, and she was able to make me feel a lot better and gave me techniques to help me deal with what I was dealing with. Yeah, the trauma.
So that's my point. Like, again, demographics are important to give you the confidence to go into the room. That doesn't mean that they keep you there.
Right.
Because there are plenty incompetent black women therapists, just like there are plenty incompetent like white men therapists, right? And so this is where it's important for you to feel autonomy in the therapist-client relationship. Because if you had issues, it would have been important for you to say, you know, like instead of just leaving. Sometimes it's important to say like, hey, what you said to me at the last session, it made me uncomfortable, and here's why. So at the beginning of all my sessions, I ask my clients 3 questions. All right, so this is after their intake, right? How are you feeling today? Something that stood out from our last session, and some very random question. It might also be like, listen to this song, tell me what you think. I might read some, or I might just say like what's something you're afraid of, or something like that. It leads into the conversation. And so the second question is the most important. What stood out from our last session? Because it's important for me to hear their feedback every single time they're in front of me about something that I said to them the last time they saw me. And sometimes some clients will pull my wig, honey, and they will just be like, well, I don't like how you said this. And I will always apologize. Now, if it's something that I felt like I feel strongly and clinically, I will find a different way to say it. If it didn't land a certain way, and I will explain myself, but I will always lead with an apology. And so it's really important for you, again, to have that kind of conversation with your therapist to be able to feel comfortable having discourse with them.
So, one question isn't about what you said exactly, anything like that. There's something that you said before when you were speaking about sexual addictions, and you had mentioned something about ASET and CSET. My question is that specifically dealing with sexual addiction or addiction as a whole? And what besides when thinking that this can be an addiction, when thinking that it is an addiction, what is that agency? What is that stand? What is that?
So CSET stands for Certified Sex Addiction Therapist.
For specific sex addiction.
Yes. And according to their model, there are 10 types of sex addicts, right? And ASEC stands for American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, I believe. Okay, so the ASEC model does not believe in sex as an addiction. It believes that sex can be harmful when abused, right? And it kind of follows the new trends following chemical addiction, which we're trying to get away from, like saying like abuse and addiction, just like harmful or misuse, things like that. The CSET model, the only reason I push back against the CSET model, which is what I was trained in for years actually, is just because it's very subjective and it doesn't lend to like people with fringe sexual experiences and needs. And it also is very heteronormative, and it was written by an old white man. You hear where I'm coming from? So, you know, it is not the most appropriate model for people of color and marginalized communities. It's very subjective. And ASEC is way more inclusive. So I look at that model more.
I don't know the model piece, but I think when you look at addiction, I think when you see that your sexual relationships are impeding or engaging in risky behavior, that becomes a problem when it affects your interpersonal relationships, like you're establishing and maintaining relationships, unhealthy ones, toxic ones, if it's used to fill a void, if it's affecting your ability to get to work, like if you have to have sex, you leave work or you're late for work. and it's affecting your life in different aspects, that's when you can realize this may be an addictive component. Let's look at it that way. That's when you know it's like, okay, something is up here where it's affecting your problem, or this is an addictive piece. Just like any other substance. What do you like to process?
Process
Addictions, like gambling. And those, yeah, the things you do. And those are the things that manifest in ways when we're coping with stress, depression, anxiety, acting out like behaviors.
So I'm sorry, we heard an introduction of who she is and what she does, but I don't know who you are, what you do, so can you?
Yeah, well, whenever we switch it over, I'm just piggybacking right now whenever she, yeah.
He lit it. But like, let's say we find a therapist, like how do we maintain mental health? Like the first thing is like following whatever, let's say you have a healthy relationship with your therapist, following whatever prescriptions that they assign, right? So I give homework, usually my homework is things to do, it might be something to read, boundaries, like conversations that you need to have with loved ones, etc. So whatever you and your therapist agree on is homework. Those are things that are designed to keep you healthy. If you have a psychiatrist or psychologist and you have medications prescribed, being medication compliant. And also your ADLs are a big part of how you know what's going on with you. So ADLs stands for activities of daily living. So if it's difficult for you to do things like brush your teeth, wash your hair, clean your room, put up laundry, feed yourself, right, go to work, things that are within your baseline, and baseline is like things that are normal, that come very easy to you, your natural behavior. If you brush your teeth 5 times a week, and then all of a sudden you barely can muster up the strength to do it, okay, something might be going on. If you are usually a person that showers once a day, and you're down to once a week, something might be going on, right? If it's difficult for you to eat, or you're realizing there's an increase in substance use, might be some signs that something's going on. Especially around this time of the year, a lot of people experience like a decrease, like seasonal affective disorder, right? So they experience a decrease in like their capacity to engage normally like they would, right? You might feel a little heaviness, a little depression. Sometimes like you don't know where it's coming from, it's just is, right? You don't have to have a reason why you're anxious or depressed. You just recognize that you are and then you treat the symptoms. Okay? And it's important for you to recognize like, okay, well something a little off. And if you live with people, it's important for you to let them know like, hey, if they're safe people, right? Not messy folks that's gonna put your business out or anything like that. If you live with safe people, you're surrounded by safe people. Letting them know like, hey, this time of year is difficult for me for whatever reason. And I need you to hold me accountable to certain things that I've agreed to do in order to be healthy. I need you to hold me accountable to make sure I eat every day, to make sure I shower every day, to make sure that I put up my clothes, or I can get up and do my homework, or go to work a couple of times a week. And those are really hard conversations to have with yourself because there's so much shame associated with not being able to take care of yourself, especially in our community. All right, so if you hear somebody only showers once a week, like, damn, why didn't you wash your ass? Like, that's like usually the pushback that you get, and you never know what's going on with that person. So I always encourage people to suspend judgment about whatever you think people should be doing with their bodies, right? But you don't know what their process is. So those are some small things that I think are really important when you're kind of like checking in to see like, am I healthy? Am I doing okay? Mindfulness is really important, mindful eating. I was just telling Brian earlier that as somebody that has anxiety, when I'm stressed out, I like to mindful eat. So that means I'm not watching TV, I don't have no phone or nothing, I'm just sitting down, enjoying my food, right? And you engage in like a certain kind of chewing style that takes longer than you can just like brush, like, you know, like you take your time. I also like to eat things that take a lot of work to eat when I'm anxious. So crabs, since I'm up here, right? When I was back home, it was crawfish. So crawfish, a catfish, something that had bones in it. Because the process of eating it takes away from like my concentration of what I'm anxious about. And it just helps me do something, right? So that, chewing gum, sunflower seeds, things like that, like small things that make me healthy, like make me feel better. When I'm also anxious, I change my core body temperature. I eat some popsicles or some frozen fruit, or take a cold shower, or sit in front of some air. That helps bring your temperature down. And I was also remarking to him that a lot of people are texture people. So when you're anxious, especially if your anxiety manifests in your hands, touching things are really calming. So I remarked that did they make it a very purposeful thing to have these swaying tables? Because it's very relaxing to people who have anxiety sometimes. Texture is really important. So my big advice is, if you recognize you have any kind of the symptoms that I described today, talk to somebody. Have a support team if you can. If you don't have one, work with a clinician that you're comfortable with to help you create that support team. And there are small steps that you can come up with, or you can look up, or you can ask me about how you can help manage some of your symptoms. Okay? And I think that's it for me.
So say it's not you, or maybe you, but say you have friends or loved ones that you recognize may need to seek treatment. What is a good way? Because everybody that I ever talk to or like try to suggest seeking treatment, what is a good way to kind of like encourage someone to seek treatment?
Are these people who are under 18?
No.
Are they showing any signs of like harming themselves or other
Yes.
people? Okay, so we're in crisis at that point. So if somebody's in crisis, then you can take a couple of steps. Like you can alert if they have a therapist or a counselor, you know who they are.
Or they've never had conversations about therapists. Don't think that that's something that people should do like that.
Well, so if they have a plan and intent, right, of harming themselves or someone else, or a targeted person with harming someone else, or they're showing psychotic symptoms, then at that point you need to call the hospital, your local hospital, or if you have CIT, which is trauma-informed kind of police officers in your area, like call them to help get them to a hospital to get evaluated. And it might cause a break in that relationship. I'm not going to lie to you.
What if it's not that serious as far as like physically hurting himself,
Okay.
but like, just seeing a lot of different, like you said, ways, what is it called, the ADL, seeing stuff that they normally do, they're not doing, or, stuff like that.
So it's a tricky question, because if they're not under 18 and you don't have legal responsibility to them, all you can do is heavily suggest, right? I would also encourage, like maybe saying, like if you want to, like I'm willing to go with you, I'll take you there myself. I'll sit outside while you wait, or maybe try to find a form of therapy that feels more acceptable to them. So some people, their introduction to mental health is through like pastoral counseling, if they're religious, something like that. Like having somebody sit down with them that they could trust to say like, hey, I noticed this too. Because if it's just coming from one person, it's not as sound as it would from a group of people, right? So if a group of people say like, I'm worried about you. Yeah, kind of, but not without the harm.
You want to be very, very careful about how you say it. You don't want to be like, yo, something wrong with you. You acting like this, you doing this, and someone said the word crazy today, how thick that word is. You want to Christian it in a way that you are concerned by using like I statements. I'm concerned about what I'm seeing. Point out what you're seeing. Kind of point it out in such a way that you're basically spelling out all the depressive symptoms or anxiety symptoms. Those are the two what I call red flag check engine light. You know something's going on. I noticed that you're like withdrawing from people, not hanging out as much. You said that you don't feel connected, hence isolation. You're feeling really bad, like you're burdened, stuff like. I'm noticing these signs, and it seems to be getting worse. And I'm noticing you're not doing the things that you used to do, and that's not you. And I know that what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go in life, and it seems like something's in the way. I'm wondering, what can I do to help you to get to that place? I'm wondering, what do you think is going on right now? Because sometimes people have a hard time identifying that they're depressed or anxious because they're so used to operating in this way, and they get this quicksand mode, and it's just like, depression can be like insidiously. And it's quicksand, next thing you know, you're just totally disconnected. So your approach can help a lot. It's the way you say it. And I think if you can talk to them, pull them aside, don't call them out in front of a lot of people, not making it shaming. You want to reduce that barrier as best as you can.
But I also think at times like that, when you actually start to identify like maybe symptoms in like your friends, your spouse, I think we also have to understand that there's things that's called like seasonal depression, that people go through times where they have those highs and they have those lows. Because I remember like when I first got diagnosed with depression, it was because I don't know how to deal with death well. And I remember when my grandmama died, it was really a hard time for me. And I would usually clam up for like maybe 3 months straight. Everything that I did prior, I didn't want to do for those 3 months because it was her birthday time, it was Christmas, and then January came and then it was my birthday. You see what I'm saying? Then my grandfather wound up dying on my birthday, so it was just one of those things like it kind of spiraled in. But after February, it was like, well, damn, Bam was right back to his old self. So I think sometimes you also have to be careful when you see those signs, because even when you approach people in that manner, they still are going to be resistant, because if you really don't understand what they're fully going through, even an approach can kind of spin that person kind of deeper into what they're going through. So you have to really be mindful of how you approach people. I think what saved me in a sense was that my nephew actually realized, like, yo, this is not him. He's bugging, he's drinking too much, like he's not coming out of his room. This dude is, at this point, I'm tipped off. So he had to call basically a mobile unit to my house, and they basically had to come and get me, because I just got to the point where I was just sitting in front of my bay window with my sheer sheets, with the wind blowing, and just really constantly just remembering my grandmother by me constantly sitting, her rocking shit that I bought back from New York, sitting in front of this window and just constantly, I was making relations with the wind coming through my window as it being my grandmother, really trying to guide me and tell me that I need to be a lot stronger, because I had custody of my nephew at that time, that I need to be a lot stronger and I need to be the man that she know that I am to be and get over this. But I couldn't put the two together. I was thinking it, the wind had me in that process, but my body was just telling me, no, I can't do it. But I had to constantly and continually to fill my cup with liquor, because I felt like that's what was allowing me to get through. It was my coping mechanism at that time. So it's just one of the things, you gotta be real careful when you have people in your space, because you really don't know what people are dealing with. So you gotta be real careful with that.
And I think that voice to also knowing things specifically. For me, with that, you see how sometimes I operate, right? If I can help, I can help. If I can't help, I'm not going to harm myself in that process either. Right. So you also have to take a look at what you see, what you have in your capacity to do, offering that help. Anybody that knows you should know that if you're lending a voice to a concern that you have for that person, that it's out of care and it's not out of malice. So therefore, if it's not working, then take that care off yourself, because therefore you'll hurt yourself in the long run when it comes to things like that. And you want to make sure that you don't get into, oh, well, I couldn't help, I couldn't do that. I'm literally going through that right now with someone extremely close to me, and I cannot let that harm what needs to happen for my development, because I can't bring you with me, or I can't help you in that capacity, right? So.
Come on, Jim. That's real.
That's hurtful.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's
It's
real.
hard to say. It's hard to say. I'm just going to be there.
Right. Yeah.
Be that best show you want to push. It's hard to
Thank
say.
you for bringing that up. That I'm really like right now.
That was everything I had to say. Thank y'all so much for listening. I'll turn on to Dr. Good.
My name is Jonathan Good. I'm a staff psychologist at Howard University, counseling service. I'm also in GW. And I'm also in private practice. I specialize in working with men of color, the LGBT population included. trauma that is typically and traditionally talked about in a very catastrophic way when we're having like an emotional response to something that terrible happened, devastating, horrific, like disappointing, a shock, like a car accident, sexual assault, sexual abuse, domestic violence, physical abuse, natural disasters, I think I already mentioned. Those, we know about those things, right? And we hear about it all the time. What I want to talk about is how we can experience trauma in ways that we don't realize that may not necessarily look like that oftentimes get dismissed, especially when it comes to people of color, especially when it comes to people of color who are in the LGBT community, like racial trauma, discrimination, hate crimes, the deaths of